Misha Tabino, good day everyone. My name is Sarah Manning and I am a citizen of the Shoshone Paiute tribes of the Duck Valley Indian Reservation in Idaho and Nevada, Niwa and Nama, and I'm really happy to be here today for part one of the NDN Changemaker Showcase, where we're going to be talking to three of the NDN Collective Changemakers, Changemaker Fellows, on this first panel, Decolonize Part 1. We are joined by Elena Terry, Halay Turning Heart, and Dustin Whitford. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about their journeys in the past year with the NDN Changemaker Fellowship. We'll hear some about the work that they're doing in their home communities and how they apply the idea of decolonization to their day-to-day work. So with that, I just want to welcome everyone and thank you so much for joining us on this production today. We'll start with a round of introductions from each of our Changemaker Fellows, and then we'll get into a bigger conversation, so stick around. We're going to have more presentations throughout the day. We're going to have some artists, and so thank you so much for joining us. So we'll kick off our round of introductions with Elena. Elena, if you could just introduce yourself to our audience.
Yes, Haini P, Haini Karagiwi, Hochunk Rajada, Hahe Maniwinga Hingaide, Nagamaichre Rajada, Elena Terry Ga Hingaide. Hello, everyone. My name is Elena Terry. I'm a member of the Ho Chunk Nation from Wisconsin. I'm the executive chef and founder of Wild Berries, which is a community outreach catering organization that does education and community building through reconnecting with our indigenous and ancestral foods. So we work with people who are overcoming alcohol and other drug abuse or emotional traumas into reconnecting to our communities through the holistic approach of our traditional food systems. I'm also a James Beard Legacy Network advisor, and I do a lot of work and am super passionate about mentorship programs. And really, it's about for us paving the way for the next generation and reclaiming, reconnecting, and sharing knowledge. So, thank you for having me. It's wonderful to be here.
We're so glad you're here, Elena, and look forward to chatting with you more. And we'll go to Halay next.
Agalasa anze sala, anzit neti san le. Hale ezeti yujiha keda nande, seminole ha zesho dase. Not wedene e zoyaha nongeni. Nande, de pole anzit neti san le abe, digati aya. Go chatla go wedene ha, dahe en ongamfe. Lechi sahande ongwa, ahende, onzi okaka nichi. Beshen saga en na. Yusana na heidik u nande yale wi dikatona shushpa dizet en nande ziototo ina nakake ina ashtale nahale siodale yujiha ele odikantwede nagakale odikantwede. My name is Halay Turning Heart, and I was introducing myself in my own language, the Yuchi language, which is an ancient isolate language, and we have a Yuchi language project that I helped to found, as well as our Yuchi immersion school, where we're raising a new generation of first language speakers. And my own children are ages 6, 4, and 1, and I've only spoken to them in my own language since they were in the womb. So there are our new first generation of speakers in about 4 generations. And so we're revitalizing our language, our ceremonies, and our culture. And my main work is in our own Yuchi community, as well as mentoring other Indigenous language programs around the world, including in Australia and in Alaska. So it's a real privilege to be here and share a little bit about our work. San Leke Asuta.
Thank you so much, Halay. Really glad you're here and look forward to chatting with you as well. And last but not least, we'll go to Dustin.
Tansekiwa no aku magantik tu temtik kitam skatan wa kakyo. Hekwa Wikas ksay no nasigasun asniwati sikutinia. Uh, Good afternoon, good morning, whatever time of day it is for you while you're watching this. Um, really happy to be here. My name is Dustin Whitford. My Cree name is Sweetgrass Old Man, and I'm the executive director for Mahtium Natig, Chippewa and Cree Language Revitalization, also known as MCCLR, which is a little bit easier to pronounce. And we are what our title says, Chippewa and Cree Language Revitalization on the Rocky Boys Indian Reservation in Montana. Uh, Currently, we have less than 80 Cree speakers, first language Cree speakers on our reservation, and we have two Chippewa speakers left who don't live on the reservation and who are both elderly. Right now, our program has been able to hire 9 language trainees who show up every day to work 8 to 4:30, and their only job is to learn the language. We have two fluent first language Cree speakers who are our instructors, one of them being my grandmother, and they're a treasure to work with every day. And it's been an amazing process so far, watching the growth of our language trainees, and the language is changing us. It's changing. It's a healing process. Um, Eventually, we'll be doing, I don't know what you would call it, clinical hours, internship hours with daycares, the Head Start, for our trainees to go into the classrooms. And their challenge will be to only speak the language to the children. And what we feel they will see and learn is that children pick up the language quicker and more efficiently than us as adults do. So that's something we're looking forward to. That'll be a 3 month process for our trainees, September, October, and November. And then they'll come back and we'll help them strengthen their language journey. Their last day will be March 31st, 2023. So I'm glad to be here. I'm thankful to be a part of Indian Collective and the Indian Changemaker movement. And it's been a pleasure to meet my fellow changemakers. And I wish you all good luck and a wonderful 2022. And I hope to meet you all in person someday. Thank you.
Thanks, Dustin. And so glad you're here also. And also, I shared with you earlier, too, as a person who also descends from Chippewa Cree of Rocky Boy, it's really great to hear some of the awesome things that are happening there with language. So thank you all 3 of you, for sharing just a little intro to what you do and your work, and all of you being language and cultural practitioners. It's just really beautiful to hear all of your languages be spoken and to hear a little bit just on this show so far about what you do. So as we know, with the Changemaker Fellowship, we're really investing into place-based solutions. We support 21 different Indigenous changemakers across Turtle Island in 21 distinct regions. And we seek out people to support people much like yourselves who have this really deep passion, this calling to do the work. And so this next round of questions I have for you all has to do with like the inspiration, the motivation, the origin story for you to get into this work. So the work of decolonization is obviously challenging. We're looking at, addressing hundreds of years of colonialism. And so if you could share now, what called you to pursue this work for your community, and why is it so important for you to commit yourself to this? And we'll go back to Elena to kick us off with this one.
Wonderful. Thank you. I was thinking about this earlier, and what really inspired me and put me on this path was my great grandmother, who was the epitome of resistance. She always wore her Ho-Chunk clothes. She only spoke in Ho-Chunk, although she could fluently speak English. And she maintained our traditional foodways. So when I was young, I mean, she was like superwoman to me, and just this powerful matriarch that knew the importance of not only being a knowledge keeper, but a knowledge sharer, and sharing that knowledge in ways that I would be able to retain it, 40 some years later. And I would still have these memories of the moments that we spent together cooking around an open fire or gathering food. And being a mother myself, it really is taking a moment and seeing that in this moment, what can I do for the future? The things that she did that I'm sure to her were just normal everyday life was so impactful for me because it was cherished that much by her that she did everything that she could in a time when it was very dangerous for her to continue wearing her clothing or speaking her language proudly. She did it, and she showed us that we could do it too. And knowing that her strength and resistance gave me these blood memories, and hopefully someday my grandchildren will be able to say, like, she inspired me. So I get a little emotional because I think that you can't talk about this work without feeling the emotion and the connection and the inspiration from our ancestors. So I think the meaningfulness of why I do the work that I do is to hopefully heal a little bit and reclaim some of that power and that strength for the next generation. Thank you.
I feel that so much, Elena. Thank you for sharing that. That gave me the chills and can relate to so much of what you shared. So thank you. All right, we'll go to Halay next. What was maybe the turning point or the impetus that called you to do the work, the beautiful work of language revitalization that you do in your community?
San laki asota nande de pole. Elena Galanjaha San laki asota dotashale. I really appreciate Elena's comments, and I think we're all, on that same heart level with our passion and our work. Really, it's a life's path, a life's journey, and certainly in my case, learning our language has been a lifetime of striving and pushing myself as well as trying to help others in our community. So my passion has been, hearing babies speak their first words in our indigenous language. And I've had the privilege of hearing that in my lifetime, even though there were times when we thought our language might end. It might end with our elders. And so I've had the joy of hearing my own children speak our language as a first language, as well as the other families in our program, and hearing their children now, just the babies starting in with Yuchi as their first language. And we've we've always looked to our elders, as our main source, our knowledge source, and our living encyclopedias. We have an oral language, and so we don't have Google to go look up everything. We go to our elders. We don't have a library for our language, but we have such a vast tradition and legacy that we're learning and carrying on. And so that's my passion, is to carry that forward in its fullness and maintain our ceremonies, and that our children would be able to dream in our language, to sing our songs and carry on our ceremonies, and give prayers, and just fully embody who we are as our Yuchi people. In our own language, we're called Zoyaha, which means children of the sun or people of the sun. And so through our ceremonies, we're maintaining that relationship with the earth and ensuring that we maintain balance as we carry on our original instructions on the earth. So for me, one turning point was when my first child was about 1 year old, and I heard him talking in his sleep, and he was speaking in our language, and I could understand some of the words he was saying, and I knew he was dreaming in our language. And for me, I knew I could do it then. That our children would carry on our language, and that my role is to be kind of a bridge between our elders, who are mostly gone now, and our children, who are the hope of our language, and to carry that forward and to only speak to them in our language, and to help inspire other parents in our community to do the same work. So, san laki asota.
Thank you, Halay, for sharing that, and such a blessing for that experience as a mother to share language with your children and to witness that just gets me just really excited too about all the possibilities of the future for our children in this time of rich language revitalization and cultural revitalization happening in so many places. All right, we'll go to you next, Dustin. Share with us, how this work is meaningful to you and what really called you into the work of language revitalization that you do there in your community.
Sure, thank you. Thank you, Elena and Halay. I've got to listen to your stories a couple times, and each time it's powerful and it's meaningful to me as well. I think there's a lot of paths that are the same in our work, and it's encouraging for me when I meet people with the same type of passion and drive. So, and as far as myself, in 2018 on our reservation, we had a really hard 7 months there where we had over 50 deaths in a 7 month span, with the majority of those being elderly. And so this was pre pandemic. And it was just all kinds of reasons that we had lost relatives. And one of our Cree teachers at our elementary school, she had approached leadership, the tribal council, requesting that they do something. They create a subcommittee or a department that would work on language revitalization, because we haven't produced a first language speaker in over 50 years, and we haven't produced a second language speaker in over 40 years. And the processes and methods of teaching the language weren't producing fluent speakers. So she had approached them and asked them in February of 2019 to do something. She wasn't given a response. And I was in the meeting that day in the audience. And our chairman was the only one who responded, who said, what, my colleagues don't seem to want to take any action today, but if you get anything going, let me know. I'd like to help. Which was good. That part was good. And I'm kind of glad that it happened the way it did, because our Cree teacher then stood up with her head down and walked out. And I followed her. To the hallway, and I said, hey, I've been having these same concerns and worries. Who's going to name our children in our language, our grandchildren? And when we're all gone, who's going to name our great-grandchildren? Who's going to run our ceremonies? And who's going to pray in our language when we're all gone? And so we sat in my office for about 2 hours, and we built this big immersion school, and it had offices, it had a recording studio, it had a ceremonial space for us to have ceremonies to teach our children. And so we built that in our brains. We had this big old building that we were going to have. And then I invited one of my cousins who's a really good strategist. He's kind of the one who kind of pushed the brakes on us and said, there's certain steps that we need to take first. Who's going to teach? Where is this building going to be? What type of curriculum we're going to use, because what we're using now doesn't seem to be working. So we started with ceremony and prayer, with one of our founding members helped us with that, who's no longer here. We lost him due to the pandemic. We lost him due to COVID, my late uncle, Merle Tendoy. He started us off in a ceremony to do this work. And seems like since then, things fall into place. Not easy, but in a good way. And so that's kind of what kicked it off was the Cree teacher um, wanting help and not really getting it at first from our tribal council, who are now very supportive of our work, and I'm very thankful that it worked out the way it did. It worked out the way it did. Had she not approached them, who knows where we would have been right now today, especially with the pandemic and losing so many more Cree speakers since then. One of the ways that all Indigenous people were colonized was through the kill the Indian, save the man mentality. And one of the most effective ways they did that was stripping us of our languages. So I think to help ourselves decolonize is through the language. I think that's one of the first steps to take, because in the language, and I think Halay and Elena will agree with me, is through the language. Within the language is ceremony, culture, kinship, even the food. All of that is in the language, and we're learning that with our grandmas every day at work here. And so that was the point that got me rolling and going with language work, was with our Cree teacher not getting a response from our leaders, but now having a really good relationship with our tribe and support from them today. So thank you. I
Oh,
hope I
yeah,
answered
you
that.
did. That was great. I hear the importance of relationships, the importance of recognizing an opportunity and persevering and really having a vision and committing yourself to that vision, pulling together community to help. And I hear that in all of what each of you expressed. So thank you so much for sharing a bit about your passion and why this work is important to you and what called each of you to this work. And we'll be talking more in the remainder of this conversation about your work as well. But Dustin, you mentioned something in your response that I want to move to next, and that is this idea of decolonization. And this is what we're going to be focusing on. At NDN, we have the tagline Defend, Develop, Decolonize. And each of our panels are going to be focusing on one of these three areas, even though we know all of our work or each of your work extends across all of these different terms: defend, develop, and decolonize. But for this particular panel, we're going to be really discussing decolonization and how that connects to your work. But before we do that, I really would like to spend some time hearing from each of you what your personal interpretation is of decolonization, what your understanding is of the word. We're seeing this word show up so much more today, especially, and it didn't show up in the same way even 10 years ago. It might have shown up just in academic spaces or in smaller circles, but now we're seeing it across t-shirts. We're seeing it all over, and some people might have different interpretations of it, and there could be a whole spectrum of interpretations actually. And so what we've experienced here at NDN is that is a reality, that different people might have different levels of understanding or spectrums of understanding or just perspectives. And so what I would like to spend some time on now is hearing from you what that word means to you. What does decolonization or decolonize mean to you, and how does that show up in your work? So two-part question. First part is, what does it mean to you? And then secondly, how does that show up in the work that you do? And we'll go back with Elena to start with this one.
Right. So, decolonize, I think, like, in order to kind of understand what decolonizing means, you have to acknowledge that word colonization, right? And what impact that had on us. And for me, in the work that I do, the whole culture was attacked through food and language, like Dustin and Halay said. It, in order to remove us from spaces where we thrived, we were replaced into different spots. Our food sources were attacked and eliminated in some places. Um, when we were taught to walk with the land, like everything for us revolves around uh, the region that we live in, our spirituality, our food sources, our language. It describes the spaces that we exist in. And so when we were the colonizers came and tried to remove all of that, for me, decolonization is reclamation more than anything. It's saying that we are here, we exist in the way that we were meant to exist in this moment, and in being able to share knowledge when it comes to something like our food sources, which is connecting us not only to the moment and nourishing us today, but it is also a bridge to our ancestors and to our future. Like the actions that we take today in reclaiming, and it's really, we're at a level of reintroducing some of these foods into our communities and reclaiming them, and even some of the wild foods are returning on their own to spaces that they haven't existed in. And it's because we're creating a space for them to thrive. And for me, decolonization is that it's creating a space for our people to thrive in the way that we were meant to, in our traditional way, eating our traditional foods, celebrating our culture, and however we need to do that in today's society, but having it be there. Because having that is our identity. It's everything. It's our stories, our creation. And I feel like the more we can decolonize and reclaim and really solidify our presence in our communities, the better chance that our future generations will have these resources. And so I think the word decolonization, I mean, it's this big word that you have to kind of face and deconstruct in your own way. But for me, it really is a reclamation, and in saying, acknowledging that we are here because of the resilience of our ancestors, and that will always be a part of who we are. And so decolonizing is reclaiming for me, and doing it very proudly. So thank you.
Thanks so much, Elena. I really appreciated your share and really relate to what you said about reclamation being such a critical part of decolonization, and really understanding the root of where that comes from, understanding that our people have been forcibly colonized. And the forceful assimilation was a huge part of that, where we were, our language and our culture was really targeted. So, you're focusing in your work a lot, in your work as an Indigenous chef, and reconnecting to food, to, yeah, reclaiming that knowledge, reclaiming that relationship. And that's just so inspiring and beautiful, and something that I can also relate to as someone who loves to get out on the land with my family and experience like the power of getting your hands in the dirt, of identifying the plants, of the excitement of being in community, the health and wealth you get from that. And it just kind of like feeds this excitement that just keeps you wanting more, and keeps you really excited and nourished in so many different ways. But there's also, I'm sure, challenges that you might have faced, knowing that the effort to erase cultural knowledge of plants, plant knowledge, medicine knowledge, was really deliberate and really sinister. And so many of our elders and cultural practitioners who might have held that knowledge, may or may not still be with us. And so, can you share any challenges that you faced in doing the work of reclaiming ancestral knowledge of plants, of foods, and with this, coming from this decolonial framework? What have been some of the challenges for you in doing that decolonial work, and how have you navigated them?
Yeah, that's a big question. There have been a lot of challenges, and one of them is, you know, it was taught to me that our food has its own spirit. We interact with our food. We not only cultivate it, but we encourage wild food. We are hunters and have a relationship with the animals that we harvest. And in trying to decolonize and reclaim, it's also reclaiming those lives and those, like, the spirit of our food. So there's this whole rematriation of ancestral seeds, which is a beautiful thing to witness and to be a part of. And even just that, saying that traditionally our people were cultivators. I live down the road from a site that it's proven 1,000 years ago we had raised garden beds. Being able to get the seeds back that our ancestors grew is just a huge obstacle, because they were trying to survive as well, and they had to go to different communities, and some of these seeds were hidden in places for safety. And just having seeds to cultivate, or battling climate change so that our water isn't too warm for fish species or wild rice. I mean, when you look at our food system, you really have to look at it holistically and say that everything that we do affects the way we are able to consume, and the way we choose to consume. It's the difference between being nutritionally fulfilled and being fully nourished, and really interacting, like I said, in different ways. So I think simply reteaching how we choose to eat, myself included, is a huge obstacle, and really stepping away from, like, it's 8 o'clock, so I have to have breakfast, or it's noon, everybody else is eating lunch, I have to eat lunch. But instead, like, eating when you're hungry, and eating just enough that you need enough, and you're not in excess, and you're not mindless. And I think even those very basic practices that some people take for granted were a result in our communities of colonization, and just saying, like, I feel differently, I'm more mindful. I mean, those are ways that we can overcome these just very, very drastic measures that were put on. And here we are, several generations later, like, I get to hear these languages, we get to eat these foods. And for me, I really like to think of a meal as being this vessel that can transport you in time and space, and can elicit sensical memories. And that's the beauty of, like, this moment, and reclaiming that is being able to experience that and then share it. So if that answers the question. Thank you.
Yeah, that really answers the question. Thank you. I really was visualizing some of my own experiences, and really thinking about too this idea of 3 square meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner. That is a very colonial concept, and I've had this conversation too with loved ones, and a loved one in particular, when I'm like, hey, I gotta have my breakfast, and just really kind of challenging the thinking around that, like what we eat, the time that we eat, and how we even interact with what we're consuming. I think is really, really beautiful to think about, and understanding the various different ways that we're nourished differently by ancestral foods when we have this deeper appreciation, deeper relationship, deeper knowledge. And yeah, I think it's fantastic. In the movement around indigenous cooking, indigenous foods, understanding indigenous plant medicines is just growing. And so thank you so much for sharing that, and really inspired already about what you're sharing, and inspired to get out there on the land right now. I know it's spring, and a lot of things are like growing, and people are harvesting and getting ready for the wave of harvest seasons coming, spring, summer, and fall. So thank you, Elena. We'll go to Halay next. And so, starting at the top of that flow of questions, we'll start back with a question about decolonization and what it means to you. How do you understand and interpret that concept? It's a massive one, and I know it might touch obviously the work of language revitalization, but obviously so much more than that. And so, can you share your personal understanding and philosophy of decolonization, and how that connects to your work every day?
San le ke asota. De pole on kiawa yuji go wedene go yutunda nichi san le. Kalahile sahi jubigahe go yutunda tena. I wanted to echo what Elena was saying, that it's really a holistic approach. And for our community, the Yuchi language is the gateway to accessing, the foods, the medicines, the songs, really the worldview. And that's why I just um, feel that my role of, restoring our home language as our indigenous language is so important as we decolonize our homes, and how we relate to one another, how we interact with one another. And the worldview that's carried in our language is just so different than English or any colonial language. And I believe it gives us the tools, the pathway to navigate any other situation that we might, come across, and shows us how we can carry forward our values, how we can live out our values. And part of that is, counteracting colonization, where we're, infusing love into our work, healing, wellness. It's so much more than just language. And we recognize that our language has been oppressed for many, many generations, and that was a systematic, intentional effort to wipe out who we are. And that by restoring our language in our home and as our first language, that we can carry on who we are and continue thinking in our indigenous ways. And so for me, I think, we realize colonization was based on greed, dehumanization, oppression, and to now come at it with a new perspective through our language of love, reciprocity, and a lot of healing, and reversing a lot of the things that we're taught, in school. So education sovereignty is a huge part of our work, and reclaiming the education of our children through our language. That our own language can be the medium of instruction, but also the basis that we can infuse our own understanding of what education really is. And the land-based education is a huge part of that, so that it's not just putting language into a box, but it's so much more. It's our diet, as Elena was highlighting. It's so important that we can be healthy and also carrying on our food ways and our life ways. So those are some thoughts that come to mind. We know that just simply speaking our own language is an act of resistance. And this is something that fuels our work at the Yuchi Language Project, that we can wake up every day and speak to our own kids in our language. And even that simple thing that maybe no one else is aware of, no one else is hearing us, that simple thing is truly decolonizing who we are. And being able to raise our children to do the same is the most important thing that we're doing to decolonize our community. Sanlaki Asuta.
Yeah, thank you, Halay. I think of just the personal experiences that I've had witnessing my mother, who is a fluent speaker, speak to her grandchildren, and to see just how much they absorb and pick up that language too, and just see how I mean, not to simplify the work that is required of teaching the languages that are endangered, but to see that when we focus and devote ourselves to teaching it to children, there's so much opportunity there, and it's powerful and beautiful to see little small children learn that language and have all these other opportunities to connect to culture, to decolonize without even understanding the word. They're doing it, they're a part of that process, and that's powerful. So same question for you too on the challenges of this all, because these languages are have been threatened and systematically attacked. so that we couldn't communicate to each other, relate to each other, connect through ceremony, to decolonize our minds and our thinking with attacking our languages. And so there have been just generations of attack in many of our communities. And Dustin mentioned this too, like we're losing speakers regularly. And so can you share, some of your own personal challenges with doing this decolonial work and how you found a way to get through those challenges and still continue committing yourself to all of this?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, we know the status of our indigenous languages is so dire, and we're in a very critical time frame where we still have elders, but our time is really short, and we must be intentional now in order to restore and revitalize our languages and pass them forward. So I had the opportunity to start learning our language at a young age, although it's a second language for me. Learning the methodology has been so important. Master apprentice and immersion, where you're learning through your language instead of mediated through English, has been so important to carrying on and revitalizing our language. And one of the challenges in our context here, we're located in, the state that's colonially known as Oklahoma, and we have English only laws here. And so it's a challenging situation as we are revitalizing our language, teaching our kids, and then those who go to public school are often punished for speaking Yuchi or looked down upon, or are have to go through special treatment in the public education system. So that's one of the challenges we've seen over the years. There's an ignorance around what we're doing, and you know, uh, we've been able to counteract some of that by just starting our own school so that our kids don't have to leave to go to English school. And that's been an important piece for our community, and raising this new generation of speakers is providing a space, a living language habitat where all day, every day, the language is valued. It's the language of prestige and the language of communication. Um, so that's been very powerful for our community, and we feel like we're literally breathing new life into our language. Um, we're, you know, dealing, because we're so immersed in the English world here and the mainstream society. We deal with, the influence of media, TV, all of these English influences, and really encouraging our parents to step back from that and um, analyze how we relate to these systems, and even how we relate to capitalism, the economy. And so these are some of the things we're doing in our program, is kind of decolonization training, and um, helping us re-examine the ways that we can really live truly as Yuchi people in a contemporary situation. You know, we want to carry forward everything from the past, but also look ahead and look forward, and um, how we can help our children thrive. And as Elena was saying, climate change and these major influences all affect our language as well, and affect our children, and really unpacking that, and minimizing our environmental impact is so important. So we believe all of this is in our language. For example, in Yuchi, we don't even have a word for animals. Our grammatical categories include humans and animals, as well as the sun, the stars. It's such a different worldview. And I believe that if we live out those values, we can counteract climate change and a lot of these forces that are really threatening our entire planet and all of humanity. So, San Asota.
Thank you, Halay. That was really moving, and I can see all the connections that you're making very clear across language and land and climate, and ensuring, in with recognizing the teachings in our language, how that can mitigate and address a lot of the ways that we're treating the land, that we're treating the environment, treating our other than human relations. And I also really valued your share on how, you identified the challenge, but you also spoke about the resourcefulness and the self-reliance that you and your core group of other language practitioners took upon yourself to say, like, we met this challenge in the public school system, but we recognize our own ability to self-determine and develop our own school. And some people come up to these challenges in these colonial systems that our people are operating within, and there's just so much frustration because those systems really don't really nourish and nurture what we're really going for. They're just kind of like this extra program. And although there is this movement for language revitalization that is very strong, I know that all of the language practitioners and language advocates that I know personally also come up to these challenges and have heard of many similar ones, even in public schools, where my own mother, who is a language teacher in our home community, was teaching language, and she subbed for another class and was teaching in that class in physical education. This was some years back, but not too long ago. And she was using the language in PE, and was told by a non-native administrator that language needs to stay in the classroom, and it was on a reservation. And so even though we see the language happening, we know that all of our language practitioners still run up to these challenges because we're still in this world where colonization and colonialism is still happening. People think of colonization being behind us, but it is constant. You mentioned the television, like all of these systems that are constantly shaping the way that we think, shaping the way that we experience the world. And that was really powerful. And so I just am really moved and inspired by your personal efforts to do decolonial work with language revitalization. And that is a good segue over to Dustin, who does very similar work in his own community of Rocky Boy with language revitalization for Chippewa and Cree language. So, Dustin, we'll go to you next, and starting again first with a question around decolonization, this big, lofty word where there's so many opportunities. What does this word mean to you, and what is your own personal philosophy around decolonization?
Before I answer your question, I'd like to add on to something Elena Terry said, and then after that, also comment on some Haley said that actually means a lot to me, and actually was involved in recently. So getting to Elena's, I appreciate both of your comments and everything you're saying. So powerful. Our ancestors were so intelligent. They were so intelligent to be able to live on this land with no grocery stores, no clinics, no hospitals, no jails, no psychiatric wards. They were so intelligent to live in harmony with our mother. And, one of the teachings I think is most likely universal tribal practice um, that I don't do. So the first thing I do in the morning, I worry about drinking coffee. I don't pray with it. I don't smudge it off. I just make the coffee and make sure I drink it before I start getting a headache or whatever. But traditionally, the first thing I should do in the morning is get up, get a cup of water, smudge that cup of water off, pray with the cup of water, give thanks, and then drink the water, which I don't do. But that's a traditional teaching of our tribe, and I would like to think and assume that it's something similar in all three of your tribes as well, and other tribes in North America, um, and probably even South America. Anyway, they were so intelligent. They're just now finding out scientific studies that uh, the water changes when it's prayed over, and it's more beneficial to the body, the mind, the spirit. Science is just now figuring that out, and our ancestors were so intelligent. They already knew that. They didn't need to study it. They didn't need to do no experiments. They just knew. They were so intelligent. I just want to add that on to what Elena had said earlier. And then for Halay, um, when it comes to the environment, my son had to speak. My son's 16 years old, and he's a Earth ambassador for the Unity organization. And he had to speak recently at a youth conference, and they had asked him about the environment and traditionally how did our people um, how did natives, how did indigenous people live, and I told what my son, his name is Watson. I said it's in the language. It's all in the language. I said if we just followed the way we speak, we would be living in a world with very little pollution. I said just think about it. When we pray, we acknowledge our creator as our father, and some tribes acknowledge the creator as the mother. Either way, and we include our mother, the earth. We call her our mother. I said, but the way we treat our mother, I said, would you treat your own mother that way? And he said, no. I said, see, if we actually followed what we call the earth, our mother, if we followed that, just think how wonderful, clean, beautiful, or more beautiful our mother would be today. I said, and so it's in the language. All of that is in the language. And I believe going through the Changemaker process and being a fellow, being so lucky, it was like not just monetarily, but it was like winning the lottery in a lot of different ways. Um, because it helped me wake up to different ideas, different concepts. I never really did think of um, the word to decolonize or even the word colonization. Like Elena said, we need to acknowledge that. Um, I don't know, and I don't want to say I don't think it's possible. It still is possible. I would like to believe to go back to the way our ancestors lived before. However, in the contemporary world that we live in, um, I don't think it's possible in my lifetime. But like Halay said, we have to adapt and figure out how to live in the world we do, but carrying on our language, our culture, and even our foodways the way our ancestors did to move forward in the world we do live in today. And I think our children and grandchildren are the ones who are going to figure that out. They're going to find that balance, and I think it's our job to prepare them for that. And the way to do that is to pass the language on, to make sure that when we're all gone, sorry, when we're all gone, they'll be able to speak to each other in our language. They'll be able to understand why we call the earth our mother. They'll be able to understand why before we take another life as far as an animal to consume it, why we do the different ceremonies we do, why we make offerings before we pick a plant to eat, to pray with. And that's all in the language. I believe that's the first step, the first key to decolonization is through our language. Um, and the challenges, there's been plenty. There's a lot of challenges because even today, even with myself, we still have a colonized way of thinking as far as how things are done. Oh, you're doing it the wrong way. You're doing it the right way. Um, oh, you're saying that word wrong. Here at work, we wanted to get away from that. So we have posters hanging up all over in our learning space, and we don't like calling it an office. We don't like calling it a classroom. We have a learning space. And one of the posters says, "I'd rather hear you say it wrong in Cree than right in English." Um, because we want them to be able to make mistakes without being laughed at. That's a challenge. That's a challenge in our community where um, our learners, even from when I was a child, are highly discouraged after making one small mistake, one grammatical error in speaking the language. And also, the word half breed has been derogatorized, where some of our relatives who may have a non native parent and a native parent have been discouraged from learning our ways, our language, our ceremonies, our culture. Even that word is not allowed in this workspace, this learning space here, to discourage one of our own relatives from learning the language. And it to me, it doesn't matter uh, how much Chippewa Cree blood you have, as long as you have the heart to want to learn. You're more than welcome to be here to learn our language, to learn our ceremonies, our culture, our traditions, our kinship ways. Uh, so that part we're wanting to change. That's one of our goals within our community. To that, whoever wants to learn is encouraged, not discouraged. No matter the amount of Chippewa Cree blood, that's a colonized thought too. We're the only um, group in the United States that has to have a pedigree. We have to prove to our government that we're native. I think the only way in the future that we will have to prove is through our language. If we don't have our language, we can't prove that we're Chippewa Cree, that we're Yuchi, that we're Ho Chunk, that we're Shoshone Paiute. All these beautiful tribes that we have. I think that in the future, the only way that we're gonna be able to prove that is through our language. So that's the challenge. The other challenge, like Halay said, is time. We don't have a lot of time with our elders, our first language speakers. So that's our competition for us personally here at MCCLR. We're not here to compete with any of our own relatives as far as language goes, who does it right or wrong. Our main competition is time. It's not waiting for anybody. That's our challenge.
Thank you so much, Dustin. I feel so personally moved also by what you shared, also as a descendant of Chippewa Cree. And I think of my grandma who moved from Rocky Boy to our community of Duck Valley and lived out her life there as she had a family. But she would always tell my sisters and I, and don't forget your Cree too. And I always like to acknowledge that I come from there as well. And so it makes me personally like very, very happy, not just as an Indigenous person, but someone from there, to hear that encouragement and to hear that welcome. Because I think some of you touched on this in different ways too, is that there's this other challenge of our people where we might feel afraid or unworthy, or that we're not enough of the community or enough or Indian enough, like our identity and challenges around identity and feeling worthy. That's really a significant issue for a lot of people across Indian country because of that deliberate, I think, attempt to attack our identities and then to break us into blood quantum and to come up with like federal recognition versus non-federal recognition. Are you enrolled or are you not? Are you from the community or are you not? There's fears around making mistakes, just a lot of fears about your own worthiness and am I good enough? And so I think all that you've shared here has also been really welcoming, and it just makes me like excited, makes me anxious. I'm thinking of time. I think like I want to get on the phone with my mom right now, right after this, or or get out onto the land, or it makes me anxious and more than anything really really inspired. And so thank you for the gift of what each of you have shared so far in your offerings and what your work has led you to understand. So I want to make sure to also touch a little bit on uh, what this fellowship in this past year with the Changemaker Fellowship afforded you the opportunity to do. I mean, obviously, you've been doing this work before the fellowship, and you're going to do it after. You were already change makers. What we like to do here at NDN is just support and invest in resource people who are already deeply invested into the work, and hopefully, be a part of supporting you all on your mission and your endeavor. But maybe we can just go around quickly to do a share of like, what was the past year of this fellowship like for you? And what were some of the opportunities that were most meaningful to you in this past year? And we're going to shake up our flow a little bit here, and we're going to go in opposite order. So we'll go back to you, Dustin, and then to Halay, and then to Elena, just to share like, what were some of the really rich opportunities in the past year for you with the Changemaker Fellowship?
Sure, thank you. So, excuse me. I had mentioned before that the Menominee Nation and our friends at Menominee U have been our guiders, our mentors, our teachers in the process that they're using, which has been really effective for their tribe in revitalizing their language. And as far as my job goes, I never had the funding to travel anywhere to conferences or to go and visit other tribes who are doing language work. So this was the opportunity that was provided by the Indian Changemaker Fellowship. I was able to make a trip out there to go and see in person for myself with my own two eyes, what they're doing, how they're doing it. And I was able to hear some really beautiful um, language. I heard young people speaking it, and it was so inspiring. I mean, like even this right now, we're talking online here. I think to be in the presence of each of you physically, it would have been even more inspiring. Even though I'm inspired already, and I'm getting so much from it already, the energy we give off physically, spiritually, mentally, in person, it just means so much more. So the fellowship helped me make that trip to go and experience it for myself. And I'll share. I got to sit in on a class they had, and I got to listen to a 18-year-old young lady speak her language. At first, she was really shy. It took her a while, but as soon as the language came out of her mouth, it just flowed right out. And I still get emotional and choked up thinking about it, but that young lady made me cry. And I thought, man, this is what we're praying for. Just like what Halay's able to experience with her own children, we're praying for that. We're praying that we could hear one of our own children in our own lifetimes have their first language be Cree or Chippewa. And so being able to hear this young lady with my own ears and watch her and be around her, that was beautiful. It was beautiful. So it brought me back, and I'm like, we're going to do this. We're going to hear one of our own children speak our language because there's other tribes who are doing it. They're making it happen. So we're going to do it. We are. It's not if, it's not we hope, it's we are, and we just don't know when. It's going to be soon. It's going to be really soon. So thank
Thank you,
you.
Dustin. We'll go to you next, Halay. Just any highlights from the past year of the fellowship and what the Changemaker Fellowship opportunity, afforded you in the past year that was unique.
Ha sala ke asota. Shtaha in ze sadi in ze di shahite kala hoti ale. Nizo wanchi ale ke asota. Much appreciation, for this amazing opportunity, and such a humbling honor to be selected as a change maker. Um, I think there's, like Dustin was mentioning, there's so many intangible benefits of being part of this community and learning from one another, being inspired by Dustin's work in the language revitalization world as well as others. Elvira was also in our cohort from the Akwesasne Freedom School and learning what they're doing, and so many others. And so part of this year has been about a lot of reflection and digging deep in terms of what are the next steps and how can we be intentional and build a sustainable strategy for the future. As I was saying, our children are speaking the language, but how do we build the infrastructure to support and sustain that? Um, because, we've heard stories of kids who speak their language for the first 5 years of their life and then lose it. It's something that we have to constantly cultivate, constantly build that habitat where the language can live and actually be used. And so for me, connecting with other communities, I had the opportunity to work with the Te Aratini Symposium at the World Expo and connecting with the Maori language group and learning from them on, they're such a model in terms of um, language revitalization on major scale. And I also had a chance to work with the Global Indigenous Languages Caucus through this United Nations International Decade that started this year, and connecting with other parents who are raising their kids in their own language, and just being inspired, here with especially some of the Native Hawaiian group and connecting with them and hearing that they're kind of in the same place, as we are on a different scale, but the parents saying we don't even have a TV, this isn't, we've decided to um, set aside our family for the language and restore as much as we can of our lifeways. And so it's just been a real privilege to make those connections. And I also had the opportunity to visit the Muskogee Eco Village in Alabama, and that out of that also helped me build the vision for our community of having a living language village where we can not only have a school but return to our agriculture and um, really live in the language, because right now there's not hardly anywhere to use the language. So we have our own homes and then our nonprofit, but we really need to create more spaces where our children can use the language. So all of that was a wonderful experience, and just being able to focus on our home language and helping my kids learn our traditional stories in our language, and being able to really focus on their learning as they're at such an early young age. My daughter, this was like her first year of life, and being able to focus on breath to breath, learning with her, teaching her our language, and really revitalizing it from the ground up. So, San Laki Asuta, really appreciate this opportunity.
Thank you, Hallie. And then we'll go to you next, Elena. If you could just share some about what some of the unique opportunities that you were able to take advantage of and experience the past year with the Changemaker Fellowship.
I have to say that this past year was filled with like gratitude and opportunity like I have never experienced before. I've been a single mom for years. I was a foster parent, and just to have people believe in the work that we're doing and say, like, I see you and you are making change. And I'm going to make this investment in you being able to continue the work that you're doing. I was able to take a small group of chefs and hunters to Alaska with me in doing a cross cultural uh, food share, really, and learning about the treaty rights of the some of the tribes in Alaska and how important it is in reclaiming and maintaining their foodways and how many people they have to fight to be able to continue these practices that are so deeply instilled in their culture. It's parallel to the struggles that we have here in the woodland region in the Great Lakes, and really being able to show up and not only educate but learn and be able to celebrate that we are still here, and the investments not made in just me, it's in my community and in our food system. So being able to take that trip to Alaska was incredible, just to see how diverse, and to know that even though we are so physically far away from each other, like we are all fighting the same battles on the home front in reclaiming. So that was like an incredible opportunity that I could never have been able to do on my own. But I think the big thing was acknowledging self-care, right? Like I am used to always being on the grind and fighting for everything. And NDN really made us take a moment. Like they made us, because they would have had to have made me do that. I would have just done it on my own. But they were like, you matter and your self-care matters. And in order to do the work that you do, you need to recognize that. So having that belief, and just like that I need that care as well, and I'm not always the one that can nurture everybody else unless I put a little bit of that investment in myself. That was, it was a shift, and really making me realize how much healing has to happen in our communities, and how the only way I can help that happen is to lead by example. So I was able to take time off and participate in ceremony that I normally would be like, okay, I have to work till close, go to ceremony, leave slightly early to make it to this next shift. And just to be able to say, like, I want to be here and I can afford to do that. Like it was something that I've never had in the past, and realizing how significant that ceremony was in the entire journey has it was something that I wasn't able to give myself. So there was a lot of opportunity, that an acknowledgement and realization that came along with the financial part of it. So, well, in Eganopshina.
Thank you, Elena, and thank you all for sharing that. It has been such an honor to learn from you all today, and in your journey the past year, and such an honor to support your work. And I know that, although the fellowship is coming to a close, your work continues. And so as we close out today, I'd love for us to just do a quick go around again, and to share what's coming up next for you. What is next for you after this fellowship comes to a close? And if you want to share any other ways that people can follow and to continue to support your work, because this fellowship was just a 1 year, 1 year investment in supporting you all. But how else can folks that are watching, or individual donors, or people that just might want to follow your work even on social media or online, how can they all support? And so we'll just go around and share, what's coming up next for you, and how can folks support. And we'll go back around the other way this time. So we'll start with you, Elena, and then go to Halay, and then Dustin.
So supporting us, we are on social media. So we have a Facebook, an Instagram, and a website that we try and share. We do the majority of our work out of Wisconsin, but we realize that we really are the Americas, so we don't like to see borders and appreciate the regionality of things. So my hopes for the future is to be able to continue building community and continue sharing and appreciating what is shared with me, and really celebrating that food is medicine, and the medicine for me is in community and in preparing those meals and sharing the healing part of that. So I'm hoping to be able to write a book in the next year or so. I've started it a little bit, and really sharing some of the stories and the teachings that we have in a way that I might share them with my children. And so, yeah, follow us. We're out in the community and we're all over the Americas.
Okay, we'll go to you next, Halay. What's next for you, and how can we support your work?
I think, as I mentioned, we're working now to build an immersion school, but also this greater vision of a living language village. And so those are our next steps, as well as a capital campaign and seeking partners to support that work and really establish a land base for the Yuchi people, which is completely non existent currently. And out of that, we'd be able to implement our outdoor curriculum for the children, as well as, raise our own crops and get back to some of our life ways and our traditional diet. So we'll put our website in the chat there. yuchilanguage.org is a great way to follow our work, as well as offer support or donations. So our vision is to add a year to our school program each year so that this cohort can continue being educated fully in the Yuchi language and not have to leave for English school. So this is a huge undertaking, but we're just so inspired by the families who are dedicated and making that commitment to raise their kids in the language. So we're in a really good place, and I'm excited to implement everything I've learned through this fellowship and carry it forward um, to help our community. San Lakiasota.
Thank you, Hallie. And Dustin, next to you, what is coming up for you after this fellowship, and how can folks continue to support your work?
So we're looking at wanting to start a program where we're not just producing these new second language speakers and then saying good luck, you know the language now, have fun. Similar to what Hallie said earlier, is we need to provide a language space for them to continue that language journey while sharing it with youth and anybody who's interested. So we're looking at starting a program where we partner with the schools, and these trainees that we teach the language to will then go into the schools and act as teachers' aides. We don't want to set up a classroom because locally our language gets half an hour twice a week. So we'd like to have teacher aides who are just in the classroom at all times, speaking only the language to the children, whether they understand or not. So that's one of the next things. Also, we would like to start our own daycare for our own trainees' children for the next cohort, but hiring our current trainees to be the caretakers in that daycare. We're also currently looking for land space within the reservation to. Right now, we're really fortunate that we have a building, a learning space, but it's not our own. We would like to have our own space where we could have ceremony, where we could have a recording studio, our own offices, and things like that. So right now we're borrowing from some very generous organizations who's allowing us to utilize the space that we are now. For people to be involved, although I do need it to be updated, we do have a website, Chippewa Cree Language Revitalization.org. I know that's kind of a lengthy title and a little bit of windy there, but that's where we could be found at. Also, we are on social media. Matium Natig Chippewan Cree Language Revitalization. We do have a few groups. On July 5th, oh, that's one of our bigger things going on. July 5th, we'll be launching our online Cree language lessons. There will be no reading or writing, and we'll only utilize TPR as our main mode of language teaching. So TPR is total physical response, where you don't read or write nothing. You see it, you hear it, you act it out, and then eventually, naturally, you'll start to repeat the word. The way we're gonna do that is we're pre-recording language lessons utilizing TPR, which the videos are very short, like 2 to 5 minutes, and we'll release those videos weekly, so they won't be open to the public immediately, only to the participants on our online language course. We'll have those open to them weekly. The videos, like I said, will be short, and it'll be up to the participants to watch the video, practice along with the video as many times as possible before the next class. Our classes are only 1 hour twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursdays from 6 to 7 in the evenings. So it'll give a chance for the families who are participating, go home from work, cook dinner, eat dinner with the families, and then jump onto the class with us 6 to 7. Then again, we're copycats. We're following along with what the Menominees are doing, and it's working pretty well. I got to participate on some of their online courses just as a fly on the wall, listening in, and it's beautiful. It's wonderful what they're doing. So why fix something that isn't broke? We're gonna do exactly what they're doing, and we're excited about it. It'll be open and free to everybody, including all of you if you want to join us to learn some Cree. So, thank you.
Thanks, Dustin. Invite accepted. Thank you. And thank you all for sharing a little bit about what's next for you. And we'll make sure to drop all of those links in the chat so that our audience can follow and support your work too. And just want to say what an honor it has been to just share this short time and space with each of you. And it's been an honor on behalf of NDN Collective to support your work and to just be a small part in your path and your journey. And we wish you continued blessings and abundance on your path and support in your work. And we look forward to seeing what the future holds for all of you. So thank you to each of you again for sharing your heart and your journey. So for our audience, thank you so much for joining us on this first panel discussion with our Changemaker Fellows, and we'll be continuing in 4 more sessions. This was Decolonize Part 1. After this will be Decolonize Part 2, and in addition there will be panels on Develop and Defend as well, where we'll hear from more of the NDN Changemakers about the work that they're doing in their home communities and their personal philosophies on each of these 3 themes. In addition, as you follow the remainder of this production, we'll have performances, special performances by musical guests Mato, Mike Jordan, our very own Mike Jordan, also known as Jordan Breen here at NDN Collective, and Lyla June, Indigenous artists who have really beautiful messages to bookend the beginning and the end of all of our productions here. So thanks so much for joining us, and we hope you join our next showcase panel for the Changemaker Fellows. Thanks so much, everyone.
This song is called All Nations Rise, and I'm just going to close with this. Thank you all so much. Indigenous people, shine your light, we are equal, yeah, yeah. I remember the days when our prayers were illegal. I remember the days when being Indian was lethal, yeah, yeah. Yeah, we had a rough past, but get ready for the sequel. Get ready for the glorious comeback of our people, yeah. Rise up, all you warriors of love, all you answers to the prayers of our ancestors from above. I could feel it in my heart, can you feel it in your blood? I could hear the seventh fire calling us to wake up. All nations rise, rise up, 'cause now's your time. We don't have to hide anymore, 'cause now's our time. With forgiveness as my bow and my prayers as my arrows, pull it back and let go. I watch them fly like sparrows. Have hope, have hope. With compassion as my shield and faith down to our marrow, we will walk the pollen path even when it gets narrow. Yeah, yeah. Resurrect, yes you can bet that we seen the single mama raising children on the res. We seen domestic violence tear apart what we have left. We seen the alcohol take it all and leave us dead. We've seen the children take their own lives when they can't take the dread anymore. We can't take the dread anymore. Or no, we won't take the dread anymore. 'Cause I can't take the dread anymore. Yes, it's a war, but we've seen it all before, and now we know we can change it, 'cause that's why we were born. We know we are the ones that we have been waiting for. Yes, we are the ones that grandma has been praying for. So rise up, all you warriors of love, all you answers to the prayers of our ancestors from above. I could feel it in my heart, can you feel it in your blood? I could hear the seventh fire calling us to wake up. Pueblo hermoso, levántense, es nuestro tiempo. No tienes que esconderte más, porque ahorita es nuestro tiempo. This next verse is in Spanish to honor all the indigenous peoples who live south of that imaginary border that has divided a continent that was once very much connected. Mujer indígena, tú eres tan sagrada y traigas medicina de tu suelo todavía. A pesar del abuso de tu cuerpo y tu tierra, respetamos tus ancestros y la suya cultura, hombre indígena. Tú eres honorable y yo veo la fuerza que todavía sobrevive a pesar del abuso de tu raza venerable. Yo respeto tus ritos, tus danzas, tus padres, guerreros del amor y guerreros de la paz. Sí, no vamos a escondernos más. We are warriors of love, we are warriors of peace, and we will not hide ourselves anymore. All nations rise, rise up, 'cause now's your time. We don't have to hide anymore, 'cause now's our time. Yeah. And, you know, people say history's written by the victors, but how could there be a victor if the war is not over? The war has only just begun, and Creator is sending her very best warriors right now. And each and every one of you are one of them, and I am that with you, and I'm honored. And this time we know that this is not a war of physical might, it's a war of spiritual might, and bullets and arrows and cannonballs won't serve us. And that it's not about white people versus brown people or black people versus any other kind of people. It's about all of humanity together on the same time, and we're fighting against our own fear. While the physical weapons will not serve us, we know that truth, faith, and compassion are the weapons we need to bring to the table right now. And that's the only weapons we really need. And so I'm honored to be here with you, and good luck to all of you on your journeys as fellows. Peace.